Yo, what is up, guys? Will here from the Fantasy Flock with Canyon. We're going to be talking about some preseason risers for fantasy basketball for us. I've gotten to see a couple preseason games from most of the NBA teams, so we're kind of doing our overall reactions and some risers from us from a fantasy perspective. For both points and categories leagues, we'll talk about both a little bit. But real quick, before we get into any, I want to say you don't want to overreact to a couple preseason games, right? You don't want to box score check and use that as, moving people up and down your draft boards. You don't want to overreact to starter rotations because, a lot of times coaches are throwing rotations at the wall and seeing what sticks, what works. There's times where you'll see, starters that don't even make any sense. And it's just, hey, the Lakers are going to try out small ball this game. So they're, starting their guards, and it's just not something you want to solidify. You're not looking at, okay, who started this last game? Those are the starters that I'm going to expect for the whole season. So I think more often you want to look at things that you're either confirming, thoughts you had about things heading into the season, or just, looking for little things and little risers, especially with some rookies that we'll talk about. Leading it off here with the Pacers. So it might be surprising to some people, but I've got Ben Mathurin as a riser. I know we're seeing him, come off the bench in the first two preseason games, and Chris Duarte is starting over him. We expected that, especially, with Mathurin as a rookie. But more importantly to me, Mathurin's looked really good and shot the ball a ton, which is, I think, what you want to see from rookies. And two, even though he's not playing as a starter in these first two games, he's playing significant minutes, which is pretty important for me. And I feel pretty confident that he'll be a heavy part of the rotation if he's not a starter immediately. So I feel pretty good about Mathurin, even though he's not a starter, which is not what I was expecting.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these other rookies people have really high already, like Banchero, Jabari Smith, maybe even Jaden Ivey's getting a lot of national buzz. And I think Ben Mathurin's kind of flying under the radar a little bit from an overall perspective. But yeah, even though he's coming off the bench, he is, like you said, shooting a lot. So he does look really good as one of those kind of, early round draft pick rookies. Second up here from the Pistons, we've got a couple of guys that are looking really good. Isaiah Stewart, I mean, he's starting right now over Bagley. They're running with Bogdanovich at the 4, and he's shooting really well. He's getting, good minutes. He's shooting well from the 3. He's stretching out. We saw that last year a little bit near the end of the season that he could shoot the 3 ball, but he looks a lot more comfortable and confident from beyond the arc, and so that's a good sign from him. And then Jaden Ivey, the other rookie, right, that people are giving him a lot more buzz, but he's looking really good and confident as well. He's playing against the starting unit. This isn't preseason. He's playing against starting defenders and guys that have been in the league for a while, and he's looking really good. In transition, he's aggressive. He's getting the line. He's had some good and ones against guys like Zion and Jalen Brunson. These are some stars that we've seen in the league. And he's shooting the 3 ball well as well, So he's aggressive, which, turnovers will come from that. But as far as the Pistons go, Jaden Ivey looking really nice. We know what Cade can do. We know what Sadiq Bey can do. We know what Bogdanovich can do, even though he's on a new team. He shoots well. But Jaden Ivey, we know he's a stud. He was questionable to see if he could, translate that to the NBA. And he's done that so far. So Ivey and Stewart both look really good for the Pistons so far.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and for Ivy specifically, like you mentioned, especially for rookies, seeing him be so aggressive offensively, I think is really important from a fantasy perspective, because you've got good scorers on the Pistons. I know people rag on the Pistons a lot, but Cade, you bring in a guy like Bogdanovich as well. With Stewart shooting more. Sadiq Bey for sure is gonna get his 3s up in the game, but Ivy looks good. I mean, he looks like one of the better parts, honestly, in through 2 games offensively for the Pistons. And yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, the turnovers, we saw that in the second game, but man, he's shooting. If he's shooting and being aggressive, I'm pretty excited for him, especially with where he's going in drafts, because obviously people are more excited about Jabari and Banchero, and you can get Ivy pretty late. So I'm pretty excited about him for sure. Next up here, we've got the Magic, and, it's kind of unfortunate, but obviously with the, Jalen Suggs injury, it looks like it's not a significant long-term injury is what kind of initial reports are, a left knee and bone bruise, but, the timeline wasn't stated. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like. It's, they reported that it depended on the treatment, and, anytime there's injuries like that, especially this close to the season start, obviously you have to kind of assume the worst a little bit. So guys like Cole Anthony and Markelle Fultz specifically, when he's back, from his own toe injury, those guys get a little bump. Obviously, the guard usage. We saw a lot of Cole Anthony last season without Fultz, and I think both of those guys get a little bit of a bump if Suggs is out, obviously. Next up here for the Magic, Wendell Carter Jr., who looked really good, and I kind of always had this kind of thought, and I think it's pretty obvious, but obviously he dipped in boards a little bit when Banchero was drafted there. That was just apparent, obvious, but I really think that Bamba is the guy who's kind of the odd man out offensively. And I think, Wendell Carter, you could argue, is even going to get better looks with a guy like Banchero who's going to draw some, defensive attention a little bit. And, Carter's a guy who can shoot the ball, who can stretch the floor a little bit. So I think he'll still be solid. He's still going to play solid minutes. Banchero's not going to wipe him off, the fantasy relevancy map that I know a lot of people think when a star gets drafted. But yeah, so he's one of those guys who I think looked good. I'm excited for, and it's not like he's going super late or anything in drafts, but I think he should be solid for sure.
Yeah, I think that goes for a lot of teams too, is, there's guys that were there and they either have high rookies drafted or free agents coming in. And so just naturally, right, they kind of go lower in boards and they start falling, and all the buzz is on the new guys. And, Wendell Carter is a really good example of a guy that is probably just going to fall because everybody else is so excited about the new guys there, but he could probably be still really good value. And him dropping, you can take advantage of that really well. So next up here, we got the Miami Heat, and the Heat, there's Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, Tyler Herro, Bam, but they've got a lot of young guys, some rookies, some new additions there, and they displayed their depth and defense in the preseason. They usually go pretty deep in the bench, specifically in the preseason. But Jovic, the draft pick from this year, looked really good, looked really athletic. He had 23 minutes against Memphis with 1 steal and 3 blocks, 8 boards, 4 for 12 from the field, 3 for 9 from 3. Again, another rookie that was aggressive on offense and very active on defense. And that's something that not only looks good for fantasy just for stats wise, but it looks good from the coaches and the staff to get you minutes on a team like this that uses a lot of different guys in rotations, off the bench, whether it be Duncan or Harrow or people like that. Jovic is proving to be a guy that earns a spot on this roster and can be a late sleeper, late add, and waiver wire guy. Someone to look out for sure from the Heat.
Definitely. Next up here we've got the Hawks, and it's a guy we've kind of labeled a bust a little bit. Dejounte Murray, who's been a riser for me, specifically. It's kind of where I've had him ranking wise. He's looked really good, and I think it's kind of understood, right? The thought was Murray fitting with Trey, and Trey being a super high usage guy. What is that going to look like for Dejounte Murray? Obviously he's not going to be able to repeat the usage he had with the Spurs last season, but man, he looked really good. And I think there's a realistic possibility where both of these guys get enough on-ball usage where, Trey is able to, replicate his fantasy value from previous years, and Murray's able to maybe be 80% of what he was last season. And if that's the case, he's not going to be a massive bust where he's going in drafts. I will say, though, I kind of want to I don't want people to get overexcited about his box scores and how well he's played, because, man, Trey played off ball a decent amount. And, in that first game, he was outscored by Murray and only had 3 assists. And honestly, if I'm just thinking about it, it's hard for me to believe that we see too many of games for the Hawks where Trey is outscored by Murray and only has 3 assists. I think, we got to see Trey scoring in the second game, obviously. But yeah, for me, Murray's a guy who's moving up my board a little bit, but I'm not getting too overhyped and overexcited. I don't think he's a bust, but I still don't want to kind of reach for him where he's going in drafts right now, because I'm still a believer that this is going to be Trey's crazy usage team. But still, Murray's hashtag good at basketball. So I think there's a realistic possibility where both of them are just kind of fine where they're being drafted at. And maybe Murray's not the big bust we've kind of been labeling him in this offseason.
Yeah, I don't, maybe he isn't that big bust, but I don't think he's going to sustain this preseason stat line into the regular season as well, right? With the usage that we expect from both of them. I don't know how much this can sustain. He was 0 for 2 from 3, which is one of the concerns we had, which, was justified there a little bit. But, he found his way through the stat sheet other ways, but I don't think he's going to keep this up, so I wouldn't over-exaggerate like you're saying as well. But I do think he will be good. So next up here for the Rockets, we've got Tari Eason. We saw your guys' comments about this. A lot of people love Tari Eason. We love Tari Eason too. and he didn't get a ton of minutes, but he was super, super efficient. 21 points, 10 boards with 2 steals and a block in the first game against San Antonio. 24 points, 8 boards with 2 steals in the second game, and he was the leading scorer for Houston in both games. And this is great because, we know Tari Eason's good. We know he can defend really well, but seeing this offensive production, the efficiency from the scoring, the rebounding, that is something that is a beautiful sight, right? We know he can be a good defender, but that's something that was like, wow, on the NBA level, can he produce offensively? And he's shown it so far. The only problem is there's a lot of young guys on this team. There's a lot of people that need minutes, from Jae'Sean Tate to Josh Christopher to Jabari Smith, Jalen Green, Kevin Porter, Alperen Sengun. There are so many guys that are so young on this team. I think Eason has pretty much proven that he should get the minutes from these couple games, but it's to be seen if this can be sustained with the amount of rotations that they might be running around there with Stephen Silas. But Eason looks really good, right? The defense is there, and the offense is shown to be really good as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a kind of well accepted thought in fantasy. For fantasy NBA guys is, Eason should see the minutes, and we think he can be like a crazy good value in drafts should that happen. But I'm just kind of in the camp a little bit where I'm monitoring my expectations just from the perspective of, would not surprise me if he's not a 22 plus minute guy. And, we do see, more Jae'Sean Tate than I would like. And obviously with all the guys you had mentioned, there's a lot of young guys that definitely will see solid minutes, but still he's looked really good. I think he deserves it. And we'll kind of see if that continues. And, there's more reports of that heading into the season. Next up here, we've got the Sixers with Tyrese Maxiell, who I have as a riser. He's a guy I've been pretty excited about. Obviously Embiid and Harden, usage monsters. But in the only game we saw in the preseason with, the three of those guys, Maxiell scored really well and he looked really good. And I've talked about it in the past. We did our breakouts video. And I think it's one part opportunity for guys and one part talent. And I think Maxiell 100% has the talent. And I could argue with a guy like Harden, who's shown to be extremely selfless. I think if Harden's a 10 assist guy, which is kind of what we're expecting, Maxiell's one of those guys who should firmly surpass Tobias Harris as the third scoring option on the team. And I think he can have a breakout year for sure. He's a guy I'm pretty excited about, and I think could be a pretty consistent scoring option. And, Harris, spoiler alert, might be one of our followers, but, Maxiell, I'm pretty excited about. I think he's legit.
Yeah, the writing was on the wall for Maxiell kind of to surpass Toby, right, on this as the third option in this offense. And we saw at the end of the season, we're confirming and affirming this in the preseason that Maxiell is a stud. Another one we've got here is someone that, we've talked about a couple of times. A lot of people are probably on. It's the Knicks. It's Jalen Brunson. And, a lot of people thought that he would do really well. He got paid, right? But he looked great. We haven't seen him with this team yet, with Randall, with RJ Barrett, but he looked really good. He was super efficient in his games in the preseason, scoring-wise. We saw that he could fit well with RJ Barrett and Julius Randle, and so, we knew what Jalen Brunson could do with Dallas. There's a lot of questions on this offense, how he could produce, and if he could, get the amount of efficiency and usage on this offense, and we've already seen it so far that he's, worth the money. So, and defensively as well, he looked really good, but offensively, he sustained, kind of picked up right where he left off in Dallas without Luka or with Luka. We saw the numbers there in Dallas, and we saw the numbers keep going with the Knicks here too.
Yeah, definitely. He's one of those guys who I was a little lower on. I think a lot of sites have him ranked pretty high, but I'm starting to like, somewhere in the middle, meet there with Brunson, because I do think we'll see an offensive breakout. I think that's pretty expected, but I know a lot of people are worried about offensively what that's going to look like, from a scoring output, fantasy output with a guy like Barrett and Randall there. But I think all three of those guys can be, solid for fantasy. And I feel pretty strongly about Brunson's offensive talent. And I think the opportunity should be there for sure. We haven't really seen, Randall and Barrett play with a one like Brunson. And I think it looked pretty good in the limited action we've seen from those guys. But yeah, those are our initial preseason risers. Obviously, I've only seen a couple games from each team, so let us know if we missed anybody on your boards that you're moving up significantly. And we'll see you in the next one where we're talking about some followers potentially.